Thank you so much for joining us today for the Pastor's Potluck podcast. Here on the Pastor's Potluck, it's similar to a normal potluck where you might get something that you want and there may be something that you just want to pass up altogether. And that's okay. There's something here for everybody. Our goal here is to encourage you and maybe in the process entertain you. If you're ready, let's dig in. Well, welcome to another episode of the Pastor's Potluck podcast. We are joined today by Pastor Cheryl and Anthony Ross. They are married. If you can't tell, they're sitting close to each other.
If you're watching.
They just
yes.
butted heads in a cute way. Not.
I mean, we do it in the not cute way sometimes too.
Welcome to marriage, but we'll save that marriage podcast for another one. Today we've got a really fun one because whenever this goes live, it will actually be Veterans Day. So we want to talk about veterans and celebrate them and honor them. And what I find interesting is I don't know that I've ever come across a family that doesn't have family members that have not served in the military. Yeah. I think each and every single one of us, maybe that is listening, has somebody that was in our family that has served in the military. And a lot of people I know that in between service personnel, there's always this running joke of which branches of the military are actual branches of the military. But for me, it seems like there's always been, there's argument between there's 4 branches and then 5 branches, right? So you got the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marines, and then the Coast Guard, which protects all of our borders by way of water. And I know that you've served in the Air Force, and
yes, I
think that the Air Force gets the brunt of all those conversations because they just say, "Oh, y'all just sit around and y'all are behind the scenes and doing technical stuff all the time." And
everybody's always jealous until they come to your chow hall.
Yeah. But do you? I know that it's playful banter between the two, but do most other branches of the military even consider the Coast Guard a form of military?
Yeah. Yeah. And listen, it's kind of like when you fight and wrestle with your little brother.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, you might punch him. You might put him in a headlock. There might be a DDT that's involved. But when anybody that's not a part of the brotherhood says something, then you get a little riled up.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I've seen that. Back whenever I was working in bars, anytime the Marines' birthday would come around or something, and there would always be fights. There would always be fights. And it was between veterans and non-veterans because they're very, very proud to have served our country. And they have every right to be proud because of just, it's a brotherhood, and people, they're just proud of the time that they have served. But one of the things that I find really interesting as I was doing some research and studying on Veterans Day was it hasn't always been called Veterans Day. It was called Armistice Day. And so it was a time and it was always celebrated on November 11th. And the reason for that is because it was celebrated for all the veterans coming back from World War I on November 11th because the peace treaty was signed on the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour.
Yeah.
And so it has always been on 11/11. But it wasn't always on November 11th. It changed for a little bit there for a couple of years. And then I want to say the president in 1954, Dwight Eisenhower, came back and said, we just need to put it back on this date. And it's been that day ever since. Yeah. So which I found really interesting. But super important to honor those who have served our country. We talked about this for a little bit before we hit the record button. We have both, I think all three of us have family members that have served in the military. Pastor Cheryl, anybody in your family that served in the military you want to kind of like highlight for a little bit and just...
My dad was a Navy guy, and then my grandmother actually was in the Air Force. My grandma, his mom was in the Air Force.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How long did they, do you know about the time
Lord.
that they served or?
I do not.
Okay.
It was before I was born.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
Obviously your grandmother,
Yeah.
before you were born.
I mean, you never know.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some older people still in the military that probably have grandkids. So.
Oh, yes. We'll get to
but
that fact later, but yeah. You'll be really surprised by a number coming up. What about you, Anthony? You said you had just pick a number, and it'll probably be, I'll tell you to go higher or lower. So
yeah. Oh gosh. Let's see. Multiple first cousins have served, but before me, people that served before I did. My uncle on my mom's side, my dad. Great uncles. I mean, just I don't know that there's been a single conflict that this country's been involved in that didn't have a member of my family serving. I think I don't think there's been a break in a year where we haven't had at least somebody serve.
Yeah.
Like my great uncle that I mentioned, he was in World War II in Korea, and my dad was in Vietnam, and so.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just remembered that's my dad. I think served in
Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's probably about the same age.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Just. A long heritage of members of my family serving in the military.
Yeah. Both of my grandfathers both served in the Navy. My grandfather on my mom's side I never really talked to my dad's father about his service time. But I talked with my mom's dad for several times because he had a box set of VHS tapes that was like a World War II documentary. Mm-hmm. And I've always been intrigued by history. Mm-hmm. And so, but I would go over to his house and ask him, hey, can we watch this? And he was always like, no, never wanted to watch it. But one day I remember he talked about it just because I think he got tired of me asking questions pretty much every single time. And he had some of his service medals, and he had a picture of the ship that he served on in his office. And so he was very proud of the fact. I think that just because of some of the things that happened during war, it's oftentimes a very difficult thing to talk about. Especially with like a 7-year-old that's just intrigued by the world. But it was just it was always awesome just to know that both of my grandfathers served in World War II and in the Navy. It was just always something that I was just super proud of, that heritage, and the service that they gave for our country. One of the stat that I was talking about that you'd be kind of blown away by was, so you said both of your parents served probably in Vietnam for you, but your dad in Vietnam. There was 5.9 million Americans that served during the Vietnam era. But the staggering one is that World War II has been 80 plus years ago, and just a couple months ago they released that there was still about 167,000 servicemen and women from World War II that are still alive today.
Yeah.
So you're talking like not just
Mhm.
grandchildren, but people that have great grandchildren and probably great great grandchildren. There may be a
Yeah.
couple that are in there.
Mhm.
So it's just incredible. I know that I mean I can speak for myself, but I'm just super proud that coming from a family that had service personnel in it, and I know that y'all probably
Yeah.
feel in the same boat as well, right?
Mhm. Yeah. So I find it what I love about my husband is his story about how he, when he decided that he was going to sign up, and well, why he did, and then when he did, and it came time to pick the job or
Yeah.
the whatever. Tell that story
Okay.
because I'm doing a terrible job.
Yeah. That's no problem.
Do you remember that time whenever I wasn't around yet, but you did this?
Yeah, so I was 17 when I joined the Air Force. My dad, prior Marine, when you're under 18, if you want to sign up, you've got to have your parents' permission, and you have to get their signature. You're not considered an adult yet. You're not emancipated, so you don't really have the legal authority to sign for yourself yet. And so my mom was a hippie, and she would not have been okay with me joining the military because I was still her baby. I was her firstborn. So I went to Dad and I said, Dad, I've made up my mind. I want to join the military. I need your signature to do it. And so he said, well, what branch are you going to go in? And I said, well, I'm going to be a Marine like you. He said, no. and I said, Dad, why? And he said, because I want better for my kid. He's like, the Marines were great, but the only thing I learned in how to be a Marine and being a Marine was how to kill somebody. And I've never had a job interview since I've got out where they've said, hey, how many different ways do you know how to kill somebody?
Yeah.
Right? It's just not good for your long-term career prospects. I said, well, okay, Dad. I said, well, what about the Air Force? And he said, okay. And so went through the whole process of, you have to take a test and, to see what your aptitudes are and your strengths are. And so after going through the whole process, we finally get to the point to where I'm supposed to meet with a recruiter to talk about what job I want to have.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the day finally comes. I go down there with my dad, and we're sitting in the office, and the recruiter is sitting across the desk, kind of like where you're at. And my dad literally, he was sitting like where Cheryl's at. So this is a very good visual representation. So the recruiter's real
I
happy.
do not look like his dad.
Yeah. The recruiter's real happy. I scored really high on the test, and so he's real happy because I can basically choose any career in the Air Force. And so I sit down. I'm 17. When you're 17, you really don't know what you want yet. And so sit down, and the recruiter's like, so what do you want to do? And so I sat and thought for a second, and I said, well, I like food a lot. So I looked at the recruiter and said, well, I like food. How about a cook? And the recruiter's like, yeah. Here. And Dad stops me. He reaches his arm over and stops me and says, son. And he looks at me and says, cooks don't use computers.
Yeah.
And I went, yeah. So I sat and thought for a little bit longer, and I was like, ooh, I love to shoot guns.
Yeah.
Right? So I said, I love to shoot guns. How about a cop? And the recruiter's like, oh, yeah, son, we can. And my dad, I can see the mental face palm that he had after I said this, but he just he reaches over, he pauses, he takes a breath. Son, cops don't use computers. And I may not be the sharpest tack in the box, but even still at that point, I realized, Dad's trying to tell me something here. So I said, okay, Dad, well, what would you suggest? And he reaches over and he grabs this big 3-ring binder that has all the listing of all and descriptions of all the types of jobs that are in the Air Force. And he flips it open and he says, well, I was looking at these 3. Come to find out, my dad had been going to the recruiter behind my back and doing all the research and what jobs. And so he chose a computer field for me. And that's how I got into the computer industry and that's how I make my living today.
Yeah. Aren't you glad that your dad was there, like looking back on it, just kind of like guiding and kind of like pointing you in that right direction?
Oh yeah, because I would have been a cook and or a cop.
Yeah, that's I think that's favor. You
Mhm.
know, I think that's like God's favor. You
Yeah.
know, even just having His hand over your life, kind of setting you up for success. Not that you can't be successful
Right.
being a cook or being a cop, but those are not typically jobs that get paid relatively well.
And well, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. My dad knew me well because he knew that I wouldn't have been satisfied in those jobs.
Yeah.
I could do them. Yes, I had the capacity to do them, but he had the wisdom and, the knowledge of who I am to go, because you can be very successful in all of those careers, cook, cop, whatever, but you have to love it. And, I love computers, and so I'm in where I love. And so, yeah.
What were you going to say?
That's what I was going to say. That his dad knew him and knew what he was into. And so he knew very well what to get him into. But
Oh, y'all act like y'all finish each other's sentences. Sandwiches. How much of what you learned in the military, like, did they set you up like really well for post service and getting into like real world work, I should say?
I think that the military teaches everybody that goes through it some very great life lessons, just in the little things like pay attention to detail.
Yeah.
Right, that's a very big lesson that you learn, because you think, well, why is that a big lesson? Well, I just pulled the pin and threw the grenade, or did I pull the pin and throw the pin?
That's a very important detail.
That's pay attention to the details.
Yeah.
So so it teaches you a lot of different life lessons like that. There's a lot of people, and I would include me in this, that really don't have an idea of what self-discipline really looks like, and how to, how that really will help you be successful as a human being.
Yeah.
And so, because the military, it takes in all types. It takes in, people from all different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so they don't make any assumptions on what the person knows. And so, that's what boot camp is about, is it, it's kind of tearing you down to build you back up the way that, you need to be successful. And so, there were a ton of lessons in life. And I only pulled one tour. So just, 4 years active duty. And in those 4 years, I would say, yes, that was really what set my my career, the way I handle relationships and my friendships, all the trajectory, started from there. They really gave me some really good guideposts on, because when you're 17 years old, you really don't know even what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so they gave me some good guideposts of, if you stay within these boundaries, you will succeed. I think that the military is, while not for everybody, I think that the lessons of that you would learn by being a part of one of the branches of service, whether you're active duty or whether you're a reservist or whether you're a guard, the lessons that you learn, I think, are good for long term. It has long term benefits.
I've noticed recently that there's a lot of servicemen and women that are actually running for office. Like you see a lot more military personnel that are running for local and local offices, and even all the way up to Senate and representatives and stuff like that. So I was kind of curious about this because we had our midterm elections this week. and just trying to see if there was any kind of stat on this. And they say about 10 to 15% of everybody that is running for office has served in the military, servicemen and or women. So, which I thought it was just super interesting because, I mean, goodness, if we can get anybody that's well disciplined and has an eye for detail, those are the type of people that need to be in leadership. You know, that way there's not things that are overlooked or, I mean, it's gone through, and the attention to detail is just super important.
Yeah, and it also speaks to who these people are anyway, because they're just changing the type of service that they do. Yeah. Right? So instead of serving in a fashion that involves weapons, you know, they're serving in a fashion that involves leadership and words. And that stat actually doesn't surprise me. The opportunities that prior service members have now, I think, are greater than they were in like my dad's day.
100% agree with that
things
statement.
With like the GI Bill and the fact that I can't speak for every branch, but I know for sure that the Air Force really pushes continuing education and you know, getting postgraduate degree kind of things. So
explain the GI Bill really quick, just in case there's somebody that doesn't fully understand what that is.
Yeah, the GI Bill is one of the benefits that that you're given by being a service member, and it is an amount of money that is used toward going to college. So you can use it while you're in the military, and all the way up to 10 years after you know, your last day of service. So and you're able to. It doesn't completely cover the cost of going to college, but it is a significant amount of money for you to, you know, maybe pay for your books and pay for rent, and you know, so you won't be able to, you know, go to school, you know, kind of scot-free, you know, but it definitely you won't be hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt either. So
yeah, I think that's super important. Is just setting veterans up for success whenever they are done with their time serving the country, because what you saw a lot of after like the Vietnam era, individuals coming back shell shocked or injured, and there wasn't a lot of help for them because more than half of the country was around protesting and saying, you know, we you know, peace, love, and don't do war. It was just that era and that time in the country. But there wasn't a lot of support for individuals coming back home. Yeah. I mean, you saw just a couple of decades prior, whenever servicemen and women were coming back from World War II, it was parades and heroes welcome. And a lot of what you saw after Vietnam was not the case. There was a lot of hostility and just nothing for some individuals whenever they came back, and especially whenever you've been in some pretty absolutely crazy moments whenever you're fighting in the jungle like they were in Vietnam. You can imagine the type of headspace that they were in whenever they came back, and so there wasn't like a whole lot of programs waiting for them, which I'm super appreciative now that we actually have quite a few people that understand the need for veteran support and supporting them and partnering with them and what can we do. I love the fact that there's companies that they only hire vets, and they give them the opportunities to be able to make an income after serving. I love that we have programs like the Wounded Warrior Project, where someone who maybe got like extremely hurt, you know, they provide houses that are handicap accessible for them. I think there's just such a wealth of programs that just say, look, we appreciate you and for all that you've done for your service. What can we do to help you out? And so there's all these various programs. And I think one of the things, especially if you see active duty, and a super important one, and we've talked about this in the past, but is mental health. I think it's just of the utmost importance to do whatever we can, because they're absolute closest friends and they're blood brothers. They went arm to arm, and some of their brothers, some of their what they consider their absolute closest family, are not able to come back with them. And so I can only imagine or try to begin to understand what they have gone through. And so what can we do to provide the support for them? And that's just do whatever it takes. Is do whatever it takes. And I know it's something that you struggle with a little bit, is some mental health problems. Have you found, as being a veteran and someone who doesn't serve any longer, have you found that it may be difficult to maybe take up some of those things, like to take up the offers on go and see a mental health specialist, or maybe be more open because of, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to pry, but I want to be open and honest whenever we have these conversations, because we can laugh and we can joke and we can cut up a lot. And I think that we do that really well on here.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've always wanted to do was just kind of like challenge myself, and be able to tackle things that are difficult to talk about.
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to make sure I point out is that I'm pretty sure it was Lincoln that set up the Department of Veterans Affairs. And, so since some of the earliest days of our country, our leaders have recognized the need to take care of those who, sacrificed limbs for our country.
Yeah.
Right. And the level of taking care of may not have been where it needed to be, meaning that, maybe at the time, like the amount of support that a particular a veteran received may not have been up to the level that was needed, but over time, as more knowledge has grown, the VA has done a better and better job at taking care of those who have served and have come back home. So, but to answer your question, I don't want to say it's just like men that have a problem with this, but I'm going to speak, kind of from my perspective. It's hard to show, weakness, right? And because we're taught from a very early age, if we're in a sport, I'll just rub dirt on it, right? Just get back in the game.
Walk it off,
right? And so, we're kind of taught from a very early age that, that we should just be able to handle everything, and that if you show signs of weakness, the opposition might be able to take advantage of that. That guy, sprained his ankle on the last play. Maybe I can get past him and sack the quarterback this play. Kind of deal.
Yeah.
So maybe
even more so hammered home, like that type of mentality whenever you're in basic training. Would that be a good statement to say that?
I will say that the military is getting much better at getting rid of the toxic masculinity. There is a positive form of masculinity, but there is also a toxic form of that. And so it was probably more true in our father's day that it was just, that it supported kind of that. And yes, in boot camp, there is also a worry that if you get injured too much, you will what they call wash back. So they'll roll you back if you won't progress with the people that you've been progressing with because you're injured, and so you have to wait till you can complete the physical part of the training. And so so there is a little bit of that in there, but from what I've heard from other family members that are, of this generation going through, that it is a much less toxic place. And so they do take people's health into consideration. Go ahead.
I was going to say, just the research that I was doing earlier said that they have made significant strides in making sure that like mental health professionals are part of their what they call their PACs, their physicians. It's like their teams. So basically at the VA hospitals and stuff like that, they have medical professional teams. And so they made a lot of effort in making sure that they have a significant amount of mental health professionals available, and that they even, because it says that like 1 in 4 active duty members even show signs of a mental health condition.
Yeah.
And so they've been really trying to make sure that there is help available, because they notice that those who do have a mental health condition, when they receive the type of help that they need, are way more productive.
Yeah.
And so they're doing a lot of things to make sure that there is help available even during their time in active duty, as well as having it set up for after the fact. And so it is a need that they've seen, and that they've really progressed in making sure that that's available. There's even if there's, thoughts of suicide, if someone is having that who is a veteran, when you dial 988, the suicide hotline, if you press 1, that's specifically for veterans.
Yeah.
Like they have access for specifically dealing with veterans, which is amazing. Because there is a different sense in it. When people come home, they come home maybe physically seeming fine, but there are unseen wounds. Like when you're talking about they've lost people, they've seen things, there's trauma, and sometimes there's trauma that's happened to someone even prior to going in, that then what they've seen, what they've experienced, what they go through, it just compounds on that previous trauma. And so they're trying to make sure that there are a lot of things set up. I mean, PTSD is 11 to 20% higher in the veteran population than in our general population. Like general population, it's like less than 4% have PTSD. But of that, of the veteran population, it's like 11 to 20% typically who deal with that. And then they said that the deaths by suicide have increased like 25% in 2020.
Man.
In veterans.
Yeah.
And so it's a very important thing. I know that when we did our mental health episode, we talked about you and your you dealing with your depression and anxiety that you have. And
and I just want to jump in here, and I hate to cut you off because you're on a great flow here. But if there's anybody out there listening, if you're dealing with depression or anxiety, you have to look at this like, how would you deal with having your leg chopped off, right? So just because you're dealing with it doesn't make you less of a person. This is just a medical condition, and there are professional doctors out there who can help you get healed with this, and just like there are physical conditions that you never heal from, that it's something that you learn to deal with. Say you've lost a limb or something, there are some mental conditions that you're going to have to learn to deal with, but you can learn to deal with them. What is very important is that you don't lose hope in this, and that you don't start pointing the finger at you about how, I can't believe I'm not tough enough to handle this, or I'm not man enough to handle this, or woman enough to handle this. Find the help that you need. There is help out there, and it is effective. It isn't easy, right? But every veteran that's been through boot camp has been through something that is not easy. So you can do hard things. And, the hardest thing with mental health is that first step. So to go back to what you were saying, Jared, did I have problems? I needed a little encouragement from my wife to do it. And it took quite some time.
Yeah.
Before I finally said, yeah, okay, this isn't something that, I can just pray my way through. If I had an accident and lost a leg, I know I keep going back to that. I'm not just going to pray my way through it. I'm going to hop in an ambulance, hopefully with my leg, and go to the doctor and say, please sew this back on. It's the same thing with your mental health, right?
But understanding that recovery times vary by individual, and that there's not just some magic number of weeks that you have to attend some sessions or whatever, and then everything will be all fine and good.
Yeah.
I think that it's just like if
there's also not a magic pill.
Yeah, there's not a magic pill either.
And I want to speak to the whole strength and weakness thing, is that, I do believe that you are taught to be strong in a lot of ways through your training, through the military. And we look at that as some kind of broken piece or some weakness, but there's really a lot of strength in the broken pieces at times. Like, you can find strength in those moments, and you can find strength in asking for help, because it does. I think for you, it took a lot of bravery and strength to decide, hey, I'm going to get help. I see it that way, but I do think that there's a lot of fear, a lot of still, thoughts about, well, if I can't deal with this on my own, then I'm not strong enough.
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of people that, I'm not of this group, but I understand this, where they're like, well, what is so-and-so going to think of me if they find out that, I have depression, or I have anxiety, or I have PTSD, or I have fill in the blank, whatever the mental health need is, and especially with our older veterans, with those who, we'll call it the Vietnam era and before, though I really want to toss in the first Gulf War lump them into that group too. So we'll say the first Gulf War and before, especially that group, the thought that they would have to go to a mental health professional might be a little tough on them because of the way that they perceive that other people will perceive them.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I really want to encourage, my older brothers and sisters out there that, if this is you, if you're listening to this and you're struggling right now, think of this more like a chiropractic visit. You can go and get your back adjusted, and you're no longer in pain. And that might be where you're at mentally. You might be able to just go and talk to a mental health professional, have a session with them, and, get your mental back fixed to where you're no longer in that mental pain anymore. You don't have to suffer just to suffer. There is help out there, and there is hope. So, no matter who you are, what you've done, where you've been, or what's been done to you, there is help. So, have the courage to set all of that stuff aside and do what you need to do to get the help that you need.
Call the 988. You can go to NAMI.org.
So there is actually NAMI.org it's called homefrontresources.NAMI.org. And that's specifically for those who have come home, from even those coming out of Afghanistan and Iraq and all of that. Like, any veteran that or service member, like, you can go there and fill out and get all the resources you need. The VA, if you just look up mental health and veterans, you can find all kinds of help that they have.
Yep.
And even if you are still serving in some way, a lot of people, I think there's a lot of fear from what I've read about it negatively impacting their career. And the statistics show that the majority, like 80%, have no negative impact whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so just don't allow that fear or any of that to hold you back from getting the help and the resources that you need. And if you need help finding those, there's always, like, reach out to a trusted family member or a friend, or we are here to help as well. And just know that, you know, you're setting an example for those that come after you when you do this. And because statistics show, like, 1 in 5 people struggle with mental health in some way, have a mental health condition. And so that's not a small number. That's not a small percentage. Like, that means that somebody in your close circle probably has some kind of mental health condition, and that person could be you. So it's nothing to be ashamed of. And that's just of the people who report it or, like, put down that they do and that do seek help. Because there are a lot of people that still have never reached out and sought for help. And what I will say, if you're afraid about what people will think of you, what your loved ones or what, listen, they're going to think that you are much more brave. If they truly care and love you, they're going to be ecstatic that you are finally seeking the help that you need. And if they're not, they don't actually care for you.
Yeah.
That's what I'll say. Because I'm sure, like, when you're dealing with depression, when you're dealing with some of the, like, the statistics for suicide deaths among veterans and stuff, when you're dealing with that, I'm telling you, they're going to much rather you go get help that you need than for you to become one of those who die by suicide, like, or one of those who suffer silently. Like, that's not what anybody wants for their loved ones.
No. And we don't want that for our veterans. We want quality life and moments that they can enjoy that bring joy, as opposed to maybe some heartache, you know, whenever they go through the rest of their lives. But
I think you can find purpose in that too. Like, I feel like I honestly do believe that you have found a lot of purpose within this in your journey with mental health, babe, because I feel like now you're a lot more passionate about it. You're more open. Like, we both, I mean, between our experiences and family, like, we have found this purpose and meaning within it all, to know that it is something that we should talk about, that we should share about. And I believe, like, when you do that, like, it helps set you up to be there for others and to
well, if you look at yourselves as probably the first two from both sides of your family to maybe do this and talk about things, you're pathfinding. And what you're doing is you're making the road ahead a lot smoother for the people that are coming behind you. It's just like whenever Lewis and Clark were exploring the Americas, they had, you know, their hatchets and
you do love history
and their machetes or whatever, and they're chopping down. And so for all the people that were following behind them on this journey, trying to find the new and exciting things that were happening in America, or trying to discover what was going on, like, it made it easier for everyone behind them, and they were able to accomplish a lot more because something was taken care of before them. Obstacles were broken down before, for the people that were following them.
And speaking into that, I decided, once I saw that there was a benefit to me through reaching out to mental health professionals, I decided that I was going to be very transparent about it to everybody. And through that, what I found is that an enormous number of people that I never would have guessed that struggled with mental health issues have come to me and said, hey, me too. You know, I also go see a counselor. And, you know, from, you know, all types of people, not not just, the ones that you would, that person definitely has some mental health issues, but just like all types of people, whether it's people that from the outside you would look at them and they're successful, or they're very solid people, or whatever positive descriptor that you want to put on them. Just all types of people have come up to me and said, hey, I also struggle with depression, and, and I've been struggling with it for years, and, just stories like that come out a lot. So I decided I was going to be like that because prior to me going, I knew very few people that had said anything about their struggles. And so it was one of those things where I thought I was about to embark on a lonely road, just to come to find out that I'm on bumper to bumper traffic, that there's just a ton of other people that have experienced the same things that, that I'm going through, and that, some of our listeners are probably going through. So, it's not a lonely road. You're not embarking on a journey that there's not other people on. It's actually the exact opposite. There's probably many more people than you can imagine that are also going through and suffering these mental health problems also. And so it's been almost freeing for me in finding out all of the people that that also struggle with it. And that's one of the things I love about Scott, is that he's also open about his struggles, and he's also kind of transparent with some of the things that that he struggles with. And I do want to make sure I emphasize this too. I meant to do this earlier and I totally forgot. It's a little bit off topic, but when you're dealing with depression and when you're dealing with anxiety, the side effects of that, they are real, and it is hard. So there are days where it's the amount of effort for me to just get up and get dressed. Like I feel like, if I could do that, I could do any. I mean, it's like an enormous level of effort, and it doesn't make you less to acknowledge that, right? It just means that I need to go and do some mental work to get to the point to where I now have the strength again, to where I can work through the issues that I have, to get to the point to where I can be strong again. It's kind of like physical therapy. You get injured, you do physical therapy, you get stronger again. It takes a long time, and there's a lot of pain and a lot of work. And then
I'm smiling because I literally, as you were talking, was like, it's like PT, and then you did it, and then you said it. But yeah. So let's go lighthearted for a second and tell us what one of your favorite things about being in the military was.
Oh gosh. There were a lot of positives. Man, I might actually get emotional on this answer, because the best thing...
Dude, you're not supposed to laugh at him right before he says I'm going to get emotional.
Because I said lighthearted, and now I made a question that's going to make him get emotional.
No, it was just because the best thing that for me for my time in the military were some of the guys I served with, and I love those dudes to this day. Like, I love them like family, like as close as much as you can love another human being. I love those guys, and they're a bunch of crazy, just lots of other words I could use for them. Bunch of guys, but
church podcast. Remember, church podcast.
I love every single thing about them, and I miss them dearly. And I wish that that I could have them all within walking distance of my house, so I could see them and hear them, and shake their hand and hug them. So yeah, the best thing for me.
Aren't you hanging out with all your buddies in March?
I sure am.
Yeah, I heard about
First
this.
time
That y'all Y'all are
quarter
going
century.
Yeah,
so.
y'all are going all meeting up in Vegas, and wives are coming along too. And
yeah, we've not met any of our respective spouses, and so it's gonna be all of us getting together and see, because we haven't all got together since we were kids.
yeah,
So we're all adults now, and some of us have kids that are graduating college here soon.
We
and
got
then
started late.
and yeah,
Barely.
and I've got a 2-year-old, so we've
Yeah.
got kind of the whole gamut. But seeing how
he said it. Sorry, he said my word.
oh,
Oh.
what
Megan will get that.
Okay.
You said
Gamut.
gamut.
oh okay so the entire spectrum, whatever you want to see of of where we're at in our lives. But I can't wait to go see them. Another thing was kind of the experiences, getting to travel overseas.
Yeah.
And
Where
stuff,
was
so.
your favorite place you were stationed?
Oh gosh.
Got to be fast.
Well,
I feel like you only
yeah,
really ever talk about Germany.
I talk about Germany. I talk about Colorado. Those a lot.
I would say Germany.
Yeah, but I love them all for different reasons. I was in Germany the longest, but I ended up staying in Colorado after I got out of the military. So, yeah, either of those two.
Nice. Well, I know that for myself and probably a lot of people that are listening, I wanted to express my gratitude to you for serving our country, for all of our military veterans that may be listening to this, or maybe there's family members. Super appreciative of all that you've given for our country so we can enjoy our freedoms that we have. I do have one last crazy fact before we get into our mystery meat on veterans, but it was really surprising, and I was kind of excited about it. But 10% of all of our veterans are women. I thought that number would be drastically lower, and I thought that was a pretty awesome number, and I think that it's
more recent years. Of course, Sherry Hedrick, one of our elders, like, she was a drill sergeant, and she said
what
she was.
You're kidding
No,
me.
I am not. And so she was when she was in the military and became a drill sergeant, there was like this push to have a lot more female drill sergeants during that time. So like, she was one of several that were down at
I just don't see it. That's like the nicest lady in the whole wide world. Every time I see her, she's like, "Hey, Jared."
Well,
but yeah, I can't imagine that woman yelling at me. My
she
goodness.
Can be stern. But yeah, it's pretty cool. When you have to talk to her about it sometime.
I probably will. I'm gonna be like, I'm just gonna be scared of her probably.
Yeah. But she said, it was during a time they were really they were doing kind of that push to get more female involved, more female leaders in that way. You had a female drill sergeant.
I sure did. She was a very tough woman, is all I will say on that subject.
Well, yeah. Well, if you have served our country, we thank you. We appreciate you. We love you. And you get to enjoy probably the most random thing that you'll hear all day, and that is our mystery meat question. I put some new ones in here.
Okay.
I can't do that one. I can't do that one. I don't know why I put that one in there.
I'm gonna have to look at that one later. I'm gonna have to dig in the trash.
No, I'm gonna set it on fire. That's what I'm gonna do. Would you rather have would you rather have 5 half-sized clones of yourself or 1 full-size clone of yourself?
I'm already half-sized.
You can tell what type of days I'm having whenever I pull these types of questions. It's usually pretty late on a Thursday, which is like the end of the week for us. And I think I did that last Thursday because I was so mentally exhausted. I was like, what am I doing right now? I feel sorry for whoever gets asked this question.
Half-size clones.
Yeah, so would you rather have 5 half-size clones of yourself or 1 full-size clone?
They still have my full brain capacity if they're half-size?
They're just half your size, which let's be honest, Cheryl. You're already half size of a normal person.
Yep. That's what I said. You just didn't catch it earlier.
I didn't hear it. You're like, yeah, it would be so like it would be quarter size for a typical adult.
Like Anakin.
Yeah.
You're like tripping over
Or
yourself.
Esme. Yeah. Oh, no. Not lots of little Esmes.
Mm-mm.
What do you think she is? I would like to
Listen,
have 5
she-
mini-me's so that way I could say, mini-me. Just for no other reason. I just
Yeah.
want to say mini-me.
You're channeling your inner...
Mini-me number 1. Mini-me number 2.
Yeah.
Ooh, I could call them thing 1, thing 2.
Ooh, no. Yeah. You probably have some pretty upset, like, people's rights groups or something like that if you're calling your clones thing 1 and thing 2. I want a full size. I want a full size 100%. Because if I need something done and I've got to be lifting up smaller versions of myself to go, hey, grab this, whatever. And I've got all these little step stools to get up on counters. I don't need any of that. I don't need any. I've got one step stool so my kids can get their bowls and their cups, and it drives me absolutely nuts. So drives me crazy.
He gets mad at me every time he finds a chair next to the counter.
Oh yeah, I forgot this is like an everyday occurrence for you.
Every day.
I'm just looking forward to the
He's
point
like,
that my
"Why
kids are
don't you
going to
just
grow
yell
out
at
of
me
this
to get-
phase.
to help you?" And so sometimes
You're not growing out of this phase.
I will go to exactly. But my kids have got on. I mean, my kids know to just, I can pull a chair over because they see me do it all the time. So
Yeah. At 2, our kid knows it. Yes.
yeah, they
Yeah.
slide the chair across the floor to get whatever they want. It's yep. It definitely is an everyday occurrence in our house. So for me, I don't think it would matter a whole lot because I already need to climb up on things to get stuff.
What if nobody
But-
knew about your other
Your
clones?
full size clone.
Like what if like
I will
you
say
and your you
I
and
would
your-
I would get jealous. So they
I
would
could have a
definitely
nap?
have to be mini me's because I would be like, stay away from my husband.
We went there.
I was just
I'm
gonna
just-
say like
I'm
you're
just
about to
saying.
have
I'm
like
thinking like I could take a whole nap, like a 2-hour-long nap without being interrupted because a full-size me is able to do my job or take out the trash or whatever else that I'd normally be doing. Yeah.
but I just said nobody else would know about it. So like you could go like say like if Erica like you just know like something's like really bothering her and you're about to have a difficult conversation, you could be hold that thought really quick, go upstairs and be like, you're in, buddy. Your turn.
Tag team. Yeah.
No, yeah, it's kind of weird. This is
Yeah.
a stupid question. Sorry.
Send us some mystery meat questions,
That is
please.
funny because this is the one
I'm
he
just-
didn't
I
throw
know.
away.
I know.
The other one was it's not a very good
Turn off
question.
your alarm. The kids are here. They're not in school.
I
Yeah.
turned off the first one. Good grief.
But what are you trying? Can you do
I'm
this
trying to
after we
reach
turn
the
it
trash
off?
can. I want to.
I'll tell you what it is after
Everybody
we shut
else
it off.
is probably wondering just as much as me. Like, wait.
So next
It was
week,
it wasn't that good of a question to be honest
so
with you.
next week on Pastor's Potluck, it may or may not be in the jar. You'll have to listen and see.
I'll tell you what it was. It was which foods would be represented by what states.
Oh.
So obviously West Virginia would be pepperoni rolls. Maybe Texas would be tacos. Maine would probably be lobster. California would probably be something illegal.
Avocado.
Avocados, yeah. So not a very good question. It wasn't like shocking,
Idaho?
but whenever I read it for the second time,
Potatoes.
Idaho potatoes, Wisconsin would be cheese,
Florida'd be fish
Florida would be seafood,
Yeah.
or gator.
Georgia would be peaches. You know, just
Yeah.
see how
They already
interesting
have-
this conversation is.
Okay. As long as it wasn't something like. Never mind.
No. Well, I mean, it couldn't be anything worse than what you said earlier, but that's all right.
It could always be worse. Let's just say that. Okay.
You immediately got jealous of a hypothetical clone.
I love my wife. y'all.
Yeah. So, hey, we appreciate you all.
Happy Veterans Day.
Happy Veterans Day. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening in with us today. We really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram. You can also watch the video version of this on YouTube as well. All you have to do is search up the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. From all of us here, we want to say thank you, and we'll see you next week.